Welcome to another episode of Comedy Wham Presents, with me, your host Valerie, and sometime co-host Ms. Purrington. ComedyWham.com is your place to go for features about all Austin comedy. You can keep up with us on Twitter and Instagram at Comedy Wham, or on our Comedy Wham Facebook page. In addition to podcasts, Comedy Wham brings you articles, album reviews, our monthly Comedy Wham showcase at Hops and Time in Lakeway, and the next one is Tuesday, January 4th. And as we approach our 6th anniversary and my personal 200th interview, I'm excited to announce that on Wednesday, January 19th, we're taking the podcast live to Fallout Theater for an anniversary chat with my good friends Brendan K. O'Grady and Duncan Carson of Sure Thing Records. And have you checked out our newly renovated events page for the live shows in Austin and Houston? If you're a comic in those cities and want your show featured on the calendar, go to the events page and click Submit a Show to complete the short survey. If you like the new survey, shoot us a quick review and we'll share your review and promo your show on Instagram. We've joined the Patreon bandwagon. Search for Comedy Wham on Patreon and check out the ways that you can support what we do at Comedy Wham. We've got some fun treats for subscribers. Oh, and you can PayPal or Venmo us too. Now let's get back to our podcast. Launched in 2016, the Podcast Project brings you funny people and their stories. As a fan, I like to delve into a comic's background and motivations, and we usually take a detour along the way. Consider the interview a way for you to get to know the folks that make the Austin comedy scene one of the best in the country. If you like this podcast, please rate and review us. Today, we are talking to a recent transplant from LA to Austin. There's a lot of those these days. He graduated from the LA Comedy Store door guy status to a spot on David Spade's Lights Out. And things kind of became a whirlwind after that. And my first time seeing him was actually on a home base show at the Paramount Stateside. And we've been very fast friends. And I say we because my son is a big fan of his as well. And he is definitely one of our favorite new comics in Austin. And now Comedy Wham presents our guest, Dylan Sullivan.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you for having me on.
Yes, welcome. Thanks for making the trek out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's get started with my icebreaker question.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there. So it's one word to describe your past.
Ooh, typical.
Typical. Okay, I would not expect that from you.
Yeah.
You didn't grow up in Texas, but you didn't grow up in LA. Where did you grow up?
So I was born in San Antonio, and it's been about 5 years here.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. My mom's side is all here, so I lived in San Antonio and then Bernie for a little bit. But most of my childhood was in Aurora, Colorado.
Okay.
That's where I grew up the most.
Yeah. Do you remember your childhood as being a funny childhood? Do you have any memories of growing up that are funny to you?
The first time I ever remember being funny was unintentional. My parents, they went to Vegas and they went to this magic show, and the magician, I don't know how old I was at the time. I was like 4 or 5, and the magician wanted me to hold this fish tank, and so that the audience could see it. But I kept on holding it. My hands in front of what the audience could see, so he kept on trying. He's like, oh no, not like this, and I kept covering it in different ways, and people started laughing, and I was wondering why, but it was just I just didn't understand what he meant, but then a bunch of people started laughing, so that was the first time I remember.
That's funny that is a memory, because at 4 or 5, you don't remember a whole ton, usually.
Right.
Yeah.
It was just a little snippet of it, so I think that was the first time I remember.
Yeah. Was traditional comedy in the sense of stand-up or funny shows that you watch, was that something that was part of your life growing up?
Yeah. I would listen to Brian Regan a lot. That was actually one of the first. And then I went to the show of The Amazing Jonathan, also a Vegas thing. Okay. And he part magician, part comedian. And then as I got a little bit older, I would listen to Dane Cook without my parents' permission. Like, all my older brother and my cousins were listening to him. So that's how,
Yeah, because Brian Regan is known as a clean comic. Were your parents particularly strict about language, or were they religious, and that's why you felt like you had to kind of sneak off to listen to?
They tried to be. And then, like, my brother and I were just like, no, this well, they tried to hold the force field up as long as they could, but it didn't take long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said Aurora?
Yes.
So that is like near Denver.
Yeah, just outside.
And there is a comedy scene in Denver. So did you figure out that there was a scene there? Okay.
Not until much later. I moved to Chicago right after high school.
Okay.
And to do school there. And there was like a school talent show, open mic sort of thing. And we just thought it'd be fun to go to. And that was when I was like 18 maybe. And that was the first time I went up and I didn't know what to do. So I went up there and pretended to be like, did an impression of like a drunk woman kind of thing. And I think it was pretty bad, but I got a couple out. I just remember the mic just being like, there was a guy with who wore a like 7-Up box where you canister and pretended to be a dinosaur. And yeah, so that was my first mic, I guess you would say.
And if I did my research right, you went to school to study film.
Right. And
before then, had you performed at all?
My last year of high school, I started doing theater.
Okay.
Before then, I was like football and sports, and then it just wasn't for me, so I moved over to theater. And then the main thing was, there's this competition they had called Mr. Grandview, and it was like a talent competition for guys. And I won that by like trying to be funny. So that was like those are the ones I that's a memory I go back to a lot.
Yeah.
Is like how that felt. Because they'd like interview you, and then they had like you did like a dance and then like all this sort of stuff. So I was just trying to be funny, but not necessarily going into it like as a stand-up or anything.
And why is it a memory that you go back to?
It's one of the first times, like, I guess, when I was cognizant of it, of being like funny in front of an audience. That was, felt good.
This is such a weird thing to be envisioning as you're telling me that. Have you seen Requiem for a Dream?
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
So I'm thinking that you got that fix, and then they loop into the the spoon bubbling over, and that was like that's why you go back to it, because you got that high.
Yeah,
that initial
exactly.
High.
My fantasies of a red dress on television, just going psychotic in the suburban.
Typical.
Yeah, typical. Yeah.
When you graduated high school and you were headed off to Chicago, what was your vision for why you were pursuing a film degree?
Well, I loved movies, and my dad was also a big movie guy, and I just wanted to do something creative. And then I also just wanted to get out of my town a little bit, try something new. And also, I had terrible grades, and that was like the only school that I was accepted to. And later I found out it was just because they're like a for-profit.
Oh,
yeah. But I got that welcome packet, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And I had like maybe like a 1.9 GPA.
Oh my god, Dylan.
Yeah, yeah.
As a parent,
yeah,
that is terrible.
It was awful. It was very bad. I just couldn't do it. I did everything but get good grades. So like, I graduated high school early, and the way to do that was to take classes at like online courses at BYU. So I did like online, and then like internships and stuff. So I just tried to cheat the system in any way I could to get out.
Because I don't know if Colorado is like this, but you mentioned that you did sports, and I think in Texas, like you have to have a minimum GPA to be able to compete in sports. So
it was the same sort of thing. I was always on like probation or like, but like fortunately for me, my teachers liked me. They just didn't like that I was a bad student.
Yeah.
So I leveraged that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and able to kind of. That was my skill in high school, or my survival mode was getting people to act against their own.
Against the rules because you're so likable.
Yeah.
Aurora is a suburb of Denver, so I wouldn't classify it as a small town, but moving to Chicago, that had to have been a little bit of a culture shock.
Oh, yeah.
Were you like in the heart of Chicago?
Yeah, the South Loop, and
okay.
So yeah, right downtown, and it was a big culture shock, but I was ready for it.
Yeah.
I wanted to just meet new people and get out there. I felt like, and then going to like a liberal art school was pretty opposite of what I had. Like my friend groups in high school, I'd move around to like many friend groups, but it was all pretty new when I moved over there.
Okay, so you're in Chicago. You're doing a film school degree. You've had bad grades in the past. Do you start to shine with this film school?
Yes, I got good grades in college. I think I went out of there. Or at least good for me. I went out of there with like a 3.6, 3.7 sort of thing, but it was also, project based. So, it started to click once I went there, and I felt for the first time I had like some sort of independence, and that also helped.
Yeah.
And it was stuff that I liked to do.
So at this point, is doing stand-up on your radar yet? Because you're in one of the, like, amazing comedy cities of the country. I mean, people talk L.A. and New York, and, we'll get to the L.A. part, but, I mean, Second City is a big part of the scene, and there is a stand-up scene.
It was still very much in the back of my head when I went to go see the school before I actually accepted. I went out there alone, and I stayed at a hostel, and there wasn't a lot I could do in terms of or just, I didn't know.
Yeah.
But there was a show at I.O., Improv Olympics. And at the time, it was in this neighborhood, Wrigleyville. And I went to a show because it was like $5, and it was something I could do being 18.
Yeah.
And I was so amazed by how funny they were. And like, oh my God, how do they do that? Sort of thing. That I was like, oh, that was part of the reason that I wanted to go there, but I didn't necessarily for that. I was just like, oh, what a cool thing to like be able to do. I'm out in the city by myself and have my own seat. It's really, but over those years, I started to do mics like later on in college, but very sporadically, like once every 3 months or so. So I didn't really understand the scene. I just knew that I liked being funny and the approval of others.
Yeah. And how did that first mic go for you? And how did you prepare getting to it?
Well, the first mic was that one with the dinosaur box guy. And I was just like, this would be silly if I just acted like it. And then I did a joke that I totally ripped off, like a YouTube. And it like didn't work, and I was like, oh shoot. So I guess I went into like with some basic plan, but that was like the first one, and then I don't know. I would just think of like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if I did this, or wouldn't it be funny if I acted like a drunk lady, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have like a wealth of material that I drew from or anything. Like that.
Yeah. So you go back a few times every few months, and you're still working on your film, and now you're starting to face a graduation date. What are you thinking about doing?
Well, I originally moved to LA for film internships. So they had like a semester. You could do semesters. So I was like, oh, I'll do a semester in LA. And when I went there, I did a bunch of film internships that were really fun, but they're very high pressure and very that world, you know? So after those internships, there was this ad for someone who needed an assistant, and I needed work. And so I was like, oh, I'll apply to that. And then they asked me to send in a funny video of myself of like a personal resume.
Yeah.
And then it was for Pauly Shore. So and I didn't know.
What was it on the back of like the Chronicle or the Craigslist ads?
Pretty much. And it was so funny because at the time, Pauly, I didn't really know what the Comedy Store was, but he's like, yeah, my office is at the Comedy Store, and it was like the top level of the Comedy Store, and it was just really, I went in there, and how he would set it up is he would have someone, timing-wise, he would schedule it so when you came in, someone else was auditioning or applying for the job in front of you.
Yeah.
Some weird, like, psychological sort of thing. And so I was waiting up there in the office for this other guy to get the job or whatever. And Pauly Shore came out and he's like, just take a seat over, you know, and then I remember because he grabbed a handful of just wet carrots. And he said, and like, put some nuts on a plate, and he's like, here's a snack. But I just remember him putting a handful of wet carrots on, like, the desk.
Oh, like, my God.
Yeah.
He's, like, putting you through, like, the whole psychological. Like, there's a psychological reason for everything he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't know who this guy was. I was like, who are you? Who the fuck is this guy?
Oh, that's right, because you're probably too young to realize who he know, and much less the history that he has.
Right. And then later on, really figuring out, like, how, you know, like, his role and everything. Yeah. So, that's how I got started. And once, he hired me on.
Wait. Okay. So so did he tell you why he chose you?
He thought I was funny, I guess.
Huh.
And I'm just like, he's like, yeah, you're like fat and gay, you're like a chubby gay guy, and yeah, that's pretty funny.
Well, you know.
Yeah, I was like, I guess. And, so I guess he likes me, and, you know, I was all wide-eyed and, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah,
so.
he probably appreciated you know, that innocence. And the likability. I'm sure that came through.
Yeah. I was just really excited to, because I didn't really know much about comedy, but I'd done like these open mics. I was like, oh, you know. So yeah, he hired me, and then I would do like, it was definitely not like, you know, a job with like a human resources. I get calls from him at like 1 a.m. He's like, hey, what are you doing? You know, like, just in bed. He's like, he just asked me this random question I had no idea. But, he would invite me to like these dinners, and I'd start to meet like writers and stuff, but I wasn't funny at all. And, the first time, he was like, oh yeah, I'll get you on Potluck, which was Monday, which was the thing that the talent coordinator watches usually. I had no idea who these people were. And I thought I was funny because I got hired by Pauly Shore. So I went there, like, I don't know, a few months into comedy, and just bombed so bad. I did like a stupid joke about like how GPSs ruin songs or something. And something about mosquitoes, and I just tanked. And there was like 3 people in the audience, and they were British, and it just didn't go well. And I did so bad that I was like, I vowed to not try to sign up for this mic until I feel good, which was a few years after that, or good enough to try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So serving as the assistant, you probably by now have been doing research on what the Comedy Store is and how it works. And are you taking advantage of that by starting to watch like all of the shows that are there?
Yeah, and at the time, Pauly Shore had written or was in the process of writing a book about his life and how it pertained to the Comedy Store. So I learned all about that, and there was like, he was doing documentary stuff too. So I'd go through all these old clips of like Sam Kinison and all these people who I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
You know, just because I wasn't in that world yet, and just like fascinating to. It was all new, and I was like, oh my gosh, this place was crazy.
Yeah.
Because I just knew all of that world from Pauly Shore talking about wet carrots, and like I would like type up. He would have these thoughts throughout the day. He on his voice memo, he'd be like, but Trump's weird because blah, 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 blah. And he would literally do that. He'd go ba ba ba, punchline, or and so I'd type it. I'd try to type out these thoughts, and I was like, "There's no way these are gonna work." But then I'd go with him to his shows, and they would just murder. And I was like, I'm looking at what's written down on the page, and then I'm like hearing the audience, and I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Because I had no idea, like, how jokes worked either at that point. And Pauly was working, he knew how they all fit together and how to get someone to laugh. So
yeah. So you're unintentionally studying the craft of writing, but also how delivery actually works to take something that on paper makes no sense, shouldn't be funny.
Right.
And then with the right delivery, it slays a room.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm curious if you ever got to actually really studying, or if you just kept absorbing all of this data and then it started just kind of osmosis infiltrate into you.
Well, after that is when, he was really the reason why I got interested in the first place. And then I had to go to Chicago for one last semester to finish school. Mm-hmm. So it was during that point where I would like really dive into it. I was trying to find every like theory and everything in the library, and like, Freud and all these like theories on humor. And then I was like trying to look into linguistics and like psychology and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's when I really dove in. And then there's like the Comedy Bible by Judy, I forget her last name, but a bunch of different, that's when I really dove into it. And at the time, Steve Martin just came out with like a master class on like comedy. So that was like my real, I didn't give a shit about school at that point because I was like, I'm wrapping this up. All I got to do. And they only required that you had like a D average. So that last semester I was really just like I put all my like, my like core electives, like the things that you should probably actually know in life. And I was like, no, I'm just going to dive into comedy. And then I started doing mics in Chicago my last, semester. And I was still very bad. So people didn't really like me much because they don't really tell you that immediately. Yeah. But it's like, if you're not funny, people don't really like you until you get funny, Yeah. So.
Did you pull the card of, but I was Pauly Shore's assistant?
Oh, all the time. Every day. I was so just like inserting myself in every possible conversation that I could. It's all I had.
Yeah. And did you know, because, comedy is definitely a game. So did you know that, man, you just had this amazing job with Pauly Shore, and now you're back in Chicago. Did you know how to work like the pump so that you could stay connected to this like, world famous guy?
I was just starting to learn. That, and then from my 6 months in LA and stuff that I learned in the film industry was like, talk yourself up at all costs.
Uh-huh.
Even if you're untalented and underqualified, which I was.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't till midway through the job and after the fact that I really appreciated working for him. Mm-hmm. Because at first I was like, who the hell does this guy think he is? But he was actually a very significant person in me even doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how many people can say that, Dylan?
Right.
Pauly Shore was why I got, really committed into comedy. Oh, you liked whatever movie?
Oh, Biodown? Biodown, bro? It's just like list his credits. And I thought that was so funny. He's like, yeah, Encino Man, bro. And I was like amazed because he did a talk at like a college, and he's like, hey, I'm doing a talk at this college. And I'm like, oh, that sounds funny. He's like, yeah, I need a ride. I'm like, all right, a lot of my work with him was like, I wasn't even paid for it, but I was just so fascinated by that point. I had gotten like the bug that I was just like, hang out with this guy. And at first I was like, I hate that I'm getting paid so poorly, but it really was one of those things where after the fact, I was like, oh, I'm really glad that I did that and that you gave me that opportunity.
Yeah. And I'm sure as you reach up with the ranks in celebritydom, you kind of realize, you can pay certain people shit, but you're giving them access to things that they would never otherwise have access to.
Right. Which I wouldn't have. Yeah. And there's people that I met, like, I remember I would start to, because part of the Pauly thing is like, yeah, like, come watch shows at the Comedy Store. And he would get me in. He's like, yeah, you're all set up. You got a ticket, and for the show. And then I'd go up and like, yeah, I'm Pauly Shore's assistant. And they'd be like, who the hell? No one said there's be free tickets.
Oh, God.
But I eventually talked them into it. Uh-huh. So I'd watch these shows, and I remember one time I tried to get drinks, and then my card bounced. And the manager at the time, Eric, who later I would be working, I'd be working there, so I'd know more, but he's like, who is this idiot who can't pay for drinks? So what I'd start doing was, I would go up, when I would watch these shows, I'd go up to Pauly Shore's office and I'd get drunk alone with like some booze that I had brought to myself. And I remember one time, he doesn't remember this, and I want to bring it up to him one day, but this is when I first started comedy. I was just getting drunk alone in Pauly Shore's office, and Adam Egget walked up there because I think he was trying to find Pauly, and I didn't really know the significance of Adam Egget. Mm-hmm. And so he just basically caught me getting trashed alone in like a dimly lit office. And it was so passé. And then later I'd be forming relationships with these people when I got hired as a door guy. And then I really started to learn like their significance to everything.
Yeah. So the door guy gig, I have this delusion that I have, because I've gone to the Comedy Store. I travel to LA somewhat frequently, and not since the COVID stuff, but I like to get to the Comedy Store, and I just like to have this delusion that I must have met you, because I know I've gone through, the door guy.
Yeah.
So we may have met in the past. That's just what I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was that a hard job to get, given your connection?
Yeah, it didn't mean anything.
Because it wasn't Pauly hiring the door guy.
No, it wasn't Pauly. I mean, it meant something in the way of like, haven't I seen that fat guy around? So it was that, Yeah. And how I got that job was they used to have a best set of the night, which they do sometimes on Sundays in the belly room. Mm-hmm. And if you had the best set, then you'd get a spot on Potluck the next day. And Mondays were Kill Tony and Potluck. So I went up Sunday and had the best set. And then I got a message from this guy, Ari Manis. And he's like, oh, you got a spot on Monday tomorrow. I still didn't know the significance of Adam Egget at the time. So, and I didn't know he was in the back watching, you know? So I went up there like, whatever. I'll just, by that point I had been drilled by so many bar mics and hell rooms that I was just like, you know what? It's never going to work out. So I'm just going to go up there and fuck everybody. Yeah. And, you know, and then that kind of worked in my favor. And, still know I had a really good set and like was set up really well and, still know who he was. And then I was just like, you know what? And then I walked out of the room. He sits on this bucket seat that's like right by the doorway. And I just was like, I left. Nothing happened. I was like, oh, I'll watch some comedy, actually. So I went back into the room. And then the second time I left, Adam stopped me. He was like, hey, that was a good set. Come by next week or whatever.
Huh.
And I think, I don't know what Adam was thinking, but I think he thought I knew who he was or something. And I was just trying to like, I'm above this. You know? But it was just my own ignorance. Yeah. You know, and then after the second time he saw me again, then everyone explained to me after the first time who Adam Egget was and what the job was. And then the second set was much more nervous and, you know.
Now you knew and the pressure was on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think it was a little bit of a turning point for you to have that moment where you say, fuck it, I don't care. I'm just,
absolutely,
whatever.
Absolutely. And whenever I mean, it's like a fine line between like not being above caring, but also being like the result of, I'm doing everything I can and sometimes it just won't work out.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it does.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
you're getting on the famed potluck, and you're at the store, you know, a lot, I imagine, as the door guy, and you can't do mics at the store all the time, obviously, because that is the cream of the crop type of comics. Are you spending a lot of time working on mics at other venues around LA?
Yes, like pretty much every night. This is all I did.
You fully committed at that point. So we missed the transition from Chicago to moving to LA, but I assume that it was driven by, okay, you've got this connection, comedy's what I want to do.
Right.
And so you are jumping in 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Into this. What was that time frame? Because we haven't really talked about, okay, this happened in this year. Because obviously the getting on the lights out was a huge boost for you. I mean, among the other boosts that you've had, right. Surprisingly, or you know, without you necessarily knowing how big they were until in retrospect, how. Tell me about the time frame of you starting full time in LA.
So I initially moved to LA for film internships in early 2016.
Okay.
I do about 4 or 5 months of that. Then I get the job with Pauly. Then I do a few more months. Then I go back to Chicago for maybe like 3-4 months again.
Okay.
I come back probably 2017 by that point. Do comedy every night or close to, for a little over a year and a half. I get hired at the Comedy Store in October of 2018.
Okay.
Then, about later on, and so I'm there for a little over a year, then get Lights Out, and that brings us to January 2020 is when I do my first like TV set, and then pandemic, and then
my heart just like sank for you. Because when I Googled your name, because I do my research, there's just so much that happened after you got that set. You were on everybody's podcast. I'm sure you were getting into a rhythm with your stand up at venues, getting booked.
Right.
So, how did it feel being so early into comedy and getting a TV spot?
It felt amazing, and I never thought in 1,000 years that I was gonna get it, and a little intimidating. I think I had a lot of support, and then a lot of people resenting that, but
Yeah.
you know, and I'm a person that really likes being liked, you know, so that stuff like hurt me a lot, you know, but as much as there was those forces were the forces that would be supportive and started making connections and just like friendships through that way. So it was all over the place and lots of highs and lots of lows, as anyone who does comedy understands, you know, or like that world.
Yeah.
You know. So I was thrilled. And I was like, oh, this is it, Dylan.
You made it!
Later, suckers. And then
March.
In March. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hold on, son.
Yeah. I know. Well, comedy has a really magic way of just, whenever you feel like you're the shit, of just smacking you down in your place again. Like, even last night I just sat and I was like, full audience, Dylan. You're gonna kill it. You've got these jokes lined up. You've been working on them for years. And there's no way that you fail. And just immediately, whenever that thought enters my brain, I just know I'm going to get smacked down. And that's exactly what happened. You know, so.
Yeah. Well, the art of being a stand-up is knowing that you've got to get back up and, you know, you want this. And so you.
Yeah. You got to face a lot of rejection personally and professionally in that. Because there's so many times where it's like, so many stories of like a manager or someone who made this TV show and they're in the room and then they love you. And you're hilarious. And then it's like, radio silence. You know.
What was the most surprising thing that happened as a result of you getting that Lights Out spot?
It was, well, I was surprised because it was great because it was a credit, but I thought that I went into it thinking like, oh, this is it, you know?
Yeah.
Welcome to the big leagues.
Yeah.
So that was a surprise that it wasn't. It was not.
Yeah.
And then, but the great thing that came with it, along with having like a credit, was I think which was more valuable was the respect of people that were above you. But you know, so. It was more about, you know, it didn't make a career for me, but it opened a lot of doors and relationships I wouldn't have otherwise had.
Yeah. So then we get the hard reality of a COVID shutdown, and you're in LA. You're in Austin now.
Right.
Was that like an immediate because your family was there, but you knew the Austin scene was a growing one at the time. Now it's just out of control big.
Yeah. Well, Brian Redband was moving there, and I had known him from the Comedy Store. I mean, he's like, if you come out here, I'll help you. And I just desperately wanted to. I felt really depressed. I mean, as much as anybody else did.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I gotta try new things and keep moving.
Yeah.
And I just felt really stagnant at the time. So I was like, you know what? I'll just move. I don't have many possessions. I didn't even have a bed.
Oh.
But I have a friend who lives in Grand Junction, Colorado, and he had an extra twin mattress. So I drove to him. I drove like 20 hours or whatever to get to him. And I just have like a Honda Civic, so I got this tarp, and I didn't know how to like shop for tarps either. And it was this massive tarp; it could have filled like an entire backyard, and it was for this twin mattress. So I wrapped it. It must have been like 30 times, and so it was just this huge kind of ball that I just put on the top of my Honda Civic and like clamped down with those crank clips or whatever, and the way I had to do it, because I funneled it in through my car, so I had this band with like immense pressure like right in front of my eyes. And then on top of that, all the windows had to be cracked open for the bands to come through. Uh-huh. And it was so cold. It was like January, and I remember it just being like, like close to 0 negative degree. I'm going like 80 miles an hour, and I'm just freezing. I'm like, I'll get to Austin. And so,
oh my gosh.
That was my trip over.
Wow. So was this 2020 or 2021?
2021.
Okay. All right. So you kind of suffered through LA shutdown for, another 9 or so months. Yeah. And then luckily Red Band's like, dangling the Austin support.
Well, the day the shutdown happened on the news, everything, all that, I was, friends and I were doing like acid that day. And it was scary enough news as it was.
Yeah.
But my mind was going like, border shutdowns, like can't move state to state. Uh-huh. I gotta get out today. So that's what I did. And my family has this cabin in Colorado. So this other comic, Cooper Lyden, was like, do you want to go there for like a week or two and see how this shakes out? And he's like, yeah. So I drove on acid that night. I mean, not on. I was coming down, but I still had like thoughts of grandeur and like, so I just drove like into the night, and we stayed at some place, and then we stayed in that cabin for like 3 months, and it was supposed to only be a couple weeks, but it was in the middle of nowhere. And then I came back, and then decided to move to Austin, and literally the morning of January 1st, I woke up and I was like, all right, let's do this. So 1st of January, I do the whole New Year's thing the night before with my roommate, see the fireworks, and then the next morning I leave.
Wow.
To get my bed.
Yeah, to get your bed. Yeah. What have you, so Austin was never otherwise on your radar. Why would it be if, you're setting up shop and doing great things in LA? What have you found about the LA scene? Sorry, the Austin scene since you've gotten here? Well,
what's been amazing about it is that stereotype is true where the networking thing is a lot. Not that there's not networking, but like it's not everything. It doesn't feel here that everyone has a ulterior motive, which was really refreshing. And I was like, oh, this is great because I'll just be doing comedy and I need to develop new material, And I've always been a person who loved moving around, and I was like, oh, this is, it seems like the perfect time, and it's just like, I'm going to go out there. And then there was a guy, Jordan Shelby, who's my roommate. He's also a comic, and he was in LA as well, and I convinced him to go out, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. And then so he joined me a couple weeks later. But Austin was a place where, well, one, it was nice to be closer to my family in San Antonio, but I didn't really know much about the Austin scene. And so when I came here, it seemed like there was a lot of transplants. And then there was this weird kind of like, I think, growing pains between the old guard and the new people, which was understandable. And both sides of the equation were like, there was the extremes of like, like, fuck them, we're taking over. On the other side, it's like, we hate you.
Right, yeah.
And I knew it's like, you're both right. Yeah. So I would try to go out of my way to make friends with like both sorts of people. And everyone wanted the same thing. Everyone wanted stage time, and everyone wanted to get better at comedy. And that felt really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're so likable, and that was going to be my one hard-hitting question because, I've observed the old guard and how they've reacted to all these people coming in to Austin, and how there's this friction, and I wanted to get your take on, well, as one of those that have come in, what do you make of this friction? And that's also my goal, is to interview more and more of the people that have been coming in, because if I don't, then, it's like, well, I'm not really giving us accurate depiction of what the Austin comedy scene is like.
Right. So I don't know. It felt like each person, each group had fair points.
Yeah.
It was there was like a basic respect thing that I think most comedians like inherently want.
Yeah.
You know, like who are these new people to move in after we built this from the ground up? And, you know, and at the same time, if you're a new person, it's like, well, I want to do comedy and I moved across the country to do it.
Yeah.
So honestly, no one's going to stop me from doing that. But I think the best way that benefits everybody is like, you know, helping each other out. The difference, it seems like, it seems like the old guard is kind of similar to LA. Was there's like an alt scene and there was a club scene.
Mm-hmm.
And the alt scene was like, I think there was like misconceptions on like which each represented, and now we've got this whole like political like, what do you mean by that? Or, you know, and so I've been trying to make an effort to. I think it benefits everybody if we come together on some things.
Yeah. And
then at the same time, you have to be like, you know, it's okay if they don't like me immediately. And that's, you know, some things are like a basic respect, I think, is the key to because it would benefit everybody if everybody's benefiting from each other's shows and spots. Right. Everyone just wants to get on stage and be funny, right? So it's a balance. I think the answer is a balance of respect and helping out people that you wouldn't normally go out of your way to help out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. And remember, anyone listening to this, Dylan is very likable, and you know it's important that he is well liked. Yeah, okay. Oh, you've grown out of the
no.
Now you don't care.
This is my stage where I get to be an asshole, and I'm loving it.
You have gotten booked on some big shows, and you know a lot of the typical process for somebody growing into a scene is creating their own show. Is that something that you have interest in?
Not at all. Because I've done that, and I applaud it. Yeah, it's so much work, and I applaud anyone who does it. I tried doing it once, and I just don't do anything. So the show had like 3 people.
Oh God!
And they just came off the street, and then it was so funny because someone who had like booked me a bunch, like when I first came in, I didn't book them on the first show, and then I see like they like, you know, took me off their Instagram and like all that sort of stuff, and I was just like, into politics of it, like being a comic and also throwing shows, it's always seemed like something where everyone resents you. Because I know I resent people that I'm like, why would, after everything we've been through? And, and, you know, I think it's like human, but I just want to avoid that completely.
Yeah.
And just like, I'm not good at it. Thank God I'm not good at it.
Yeah.
You know? So
1.9 GPA putting on shows. If
I ever do a show, I want it to just be like, my roommate and I were considering like doing a 2-person show, like ourselves.
Yeah.
So that it would eliminate all the like, I didn't get booked. Well, you didn't because it was just him and I. Yeah. And don't shoot, you know, that sort of thing.
What about a podcast? Everybody's got to have a podcast, you know.
I guess. I just know I just, over the years, I've just said so many bad things, I'm sure. And just like, you know, I get like a whiskey in me and I'm just like, I've listened to past ones and I was just like, I want to do a podcast and stuff. I guess I always had this idea around like, oh, the industries, they're watching your every move. Yeah. Turns out they could care less about anybody. So.
Yeah, That's pretty much.
Yeah, but maybe one day in the future I'll have a podcast.
Yeah. So now, going 2 years later, what lessons does Dylan have for kind of going back to that idea of the networking, these opportunities that you had with big names in the industry? How do you keep working the game of not completely losing the momentum of those opportunities that you had, especially the 2021?
Right. I don't know.
You don't know? Oh, man, I was hoping you would.
The social media is obviously important, and just staying on people's radar. Yeah. I think that's like the main way, and like, because I've had things from like friends of friends have given me like, if they see you a lot, then you'll be on their minds. But it's a balance of like, at least in my mind, I don't know how it actually is because I haven't figured it out yet. but of like being there, but also there's a fine line of where you get into annoying territory and trying to stay not annoying but around.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have no idea what that answer is, but
yeah.
But yeah, and then you just talk to people and I think try to put yourself out there in life and a little bit online. I need to get better about that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Do you see yourself using that film degree, much as it was, in some way? Because that just, the stand-up comic, eventually you see them in movies. They write their own movies. I'm thinking of the Adam Sandler, the David Spades, Is that something that you think about calling up whatever you learned?
Yeah, absolutely. There were some really like beneficial classes that I took, or just like things you could study, and I hope to use those in the future. And even with the videos I do, I was like, oh, I know I could make this a little better than just like than average, I guess. If I were just think about it and put a little more detail into it. So I guess just learning to think like that, and like just watching stuff that you really like, that you find interesting, and trying to replicate that in like your own way.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah. We're going to start wrapping up. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want people to know about you?
Oh gosh. I'm not a very complex individual. I wish I had like the story. But I'm pretty plain Jane.
Yeah. All right. Well,
sorry, that was such an underwhelming answer.
Well, I know that I was very, very happy to watch you on the Home Base show. That was my first introduction to seeing your comedy, and I was very lucky that you agreed to do my little show out here.
That was a blast, yeah.
And you have a fan for life, and the teenager set here. This is my roommate. So we definitely hope that you keep landing these opportunities and keep getting bigger and bigger notoriety and fame and all that good stuff.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope the same thing's for me. No,
yes, that would be the
for real. Thank you so much for having me on. It was a really fun time.
So I have a closing question that I like to ask.
Sure.
And that is one word to describe your future.
Wow. One word to describe future. Car wreck. No, the car wrecks too. I would say, realizations, maybe. I have no idea. I try to sound smart, and I that was like the only 3-syllable one I knew. And I think it doesn't count with like, I don't know.
Well, one of my favorites that I've ever gotten was oof. So
we'll
take anything.
That's so great. Damn it. All right.
Do you want to redo? Do you want to come up with like a grunting?
Yeah. Brooding or no, I'll, meh.
A meh future. Okay.
We'll see.
Well, that is a wrap on Comedy Wham Presents Dylan Sullivan. Tell us where we can find you on social media and promote away.
So I have an Instagram. It's Dylan Ray Soul on Instagram. You can find me there. I sporadically post. And as for things that are coming up, not much.
Uh-oh. Book him.
Book me. Please. I'm begging you. God.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed learning about how Dylan got to be the very likable comedic genius that you heard today, just as much as I have. This has been Comedy Wham Presents Dylan Sullivan. I'm Valerie, and that's been funny. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you, Valerie.